This is The Chris Berry Show. Expert information on elder law, retirement, and estate planning. Information that you can understand. Here's your host, Chris Berry.
Welcome to The Chris Berry Show, where we talk wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. And every week on The Chris Berry Show, we start off with a positive focus, something positive that happened the past week. And so for me, my positive focus, actually two nonprofits, two charities that we contributed to. So first, we just finished up the walk to End Alzheimer's. Super excited about how that turned out. We raised over $15,000 as a team and well over $100,000 as a walk for the walk to End Alzheimer's. We don't have the final numbers in yet. I'll be able to share those maybe next week. But we're pretty excited to raise over $15,000 to fight Alzheimer's as a team. And then as a walk as a whole, we were well over $100,000. And I'll have those exact numbers next week, I think. So thank you, everyone who helped to contribute to the walk. Or even if you didn't contribute, thank you for listening to all of the Alzheimer's discussion we've had the last couple of weeks leading up to the walk. We think it's an important cause, especially as we're planning for the second half of life, long-term care costs, Alzheimer's disease, all of those things can have a devastating effect on family. And so we wanted to raise awareness and raise funds for that cause. So that was one thing that was great, was the actual walk, because we've put in a lot of effort leading up to that. And then the other exciting thing was that I attended a charity gala for Fox Run. So Fox Run is a continued care retirement community where they have independent living, assisted living, and nursing home care, really all in one location. And they have a campus in Novi. Novi is where they're located. And one of the nice things about Fox Run is they have this care fund for their residents where if you were to move in and run out of money, they're not going to necessarily kick you out because they have this benevolence fund. And so every year they have an annual gala to help raise money for this care fund. And so this year we were one of the major contributors to the cause this year. We were a platinum sponsor. And we had an event. It was kind of like a Hollywood red carpet type event. So it was great. We had a couple of our team members, some other members in the community at our table. And it was just a great event, raising awareness for this care fund. A lot of the residents even contribute to the fund as well for other residents. So it was great being a part of that community. It was a great event, and I was able to spend some good time with good friends for a good cause. And so both things were pretty positive and pretty excited to share that. Now, we hinted at this last week if you're listening, but there's a big law change recently, and this is maybe a unpositive focus, which I don't like to focus on the bad things, but there was a big change in law, and this affects veterans and surviving spouses of veterans. And before I got into that big change in law, which we'll dive deeper into in our next segment, I'll just touch upon it now, is that they instituted a look-back period for qualifying for the non-service connected pension. And it's a 3-year look-back period. And we're going to talk more about this in our second segment today. We're going to talk about veterans benefits and how that fits into the ways that we can pay for long-term care and what this change really means. But before we dive deeper into that, I thought it would be important to talk about kind of Fox Run as a continued care retirement community and how that fits into the different levels of care that we can receive if we were to need long-term care. And it's something that we focus on a lot on the Chris Berry Show, is long-term care costs, because it is one of the most important things when it comes to planning for that second half of life, planning for what happens after retirement. And long-term care costs can have a devastating effect on your retirement. So we spend a lot of time talking about that. Next week, I think we're going to change gears and get back into IRAs and talk about some IRA basic concepts, some of the teachings from one of the gurus out there, Ed Slott. But in this segment, this show, I want to talk about just how kind of a continued care retirement community like Fox Run fits into that long-term care journey. And then in the second segment, we're going to focus on that VA benefit change and the ways that we can pay for the different types of care. So we call this kind of the elder care journey. If we start off living at home independently, and then we get to the point where we might need some assistance, or maybe we don't want to live at home independently anymore. And this might be one of the spots where someone would look to a continued care retirement community. And what a continued care retirement community is basically a community where you can have different levels of care all on one campus, all in one location. So it kind of takes care of the whole elder care journey, all with one decision, one location. And there's some pros and cons to looking at continued care retirement communities. But first, we need to understand what the elder care journey looks like. So we start out living at home independently, and then as we begin to age, we need more assistance. And that assistance might take the form of a spouse until we have what we call caregiver burnout, where now the spouse who's receiving the care, or the spouse who's providing the care, needs more help than the spouse who's receiving the care. And then we might have family members helping out. So this is where the kids get involved. Maybe someone puts their life on hold to become a full-time caregiver. Then we might transition from living at home, maybe with assistance, maybe now we need to bring in a commercial home care company. So this is like the Visiting Angels or the Comfort Keepers, and there's a variety of different private duty home care companies out there. And if you're buying home care, commercial home care, it might be $1,000 to $3,000 a month. If you're buying a couple hours per day, a couple times per week, you're looking at about $20 to $25 per hour. So it's not cheap. And then you might transition to maybe independent or assisted living. So this is going to be things like an American House, Independence Village, Brookdale, Sunrise. And this is kind of senior communities, but now the lines are starting to gray between the independent living and the assisted living, because even the assisted living communities, or even the independent living communities, are bringing in commercial home care to kind of almost make it seem like they are an assisted living. So think of this as like a hotel or apartment type environment with additional services available. And if you get into the assisted living side, then there might be some care services available. A lot of times after a long day, I wish I lived in an assisted living, because then I wouldn't have to worry about making meals or cleaning up after myself. I could just worry about where the next game of shuffleboard or euchre is at. So kind of reminds me almost of college in that sense. But your typical independent or assisted living, it's going to cost you anywhere from $2,000 to maybe $5,000 a month. And there's a variety of different assisted living or independent livings out there. But then we might transition to needing even more care. So maybe we need some assisted living with memory care. And this might be that same assisted living environment, but now more of a protective environment, especially if we have an Alzheimer's diagnosis or dementia diagnosis. We need more of a protective environment, more of a lockdown environment, and there might be more memory care services available. And this is going to be places like your Arden Courts of the world. This will run you typically $5,000 to $8,000 per month. And then the final step on that elder care journey is nursing home level care. This is more of a hospital type environment, think of it more as a bed versus being mobile and walking around. And your typical nursing home is going to cost you about $8,000 to $12,000 per month. And the average stay in a nursing home is about 2.5 years. And 1 in 2 people are going to set foot in a nursing home. But that's just nursing home care. That's not talking about assisted living. That's not talking about home care. And the most recent statistic is that 3 out of 4 people are going to need some form of long-term care. In trying to figure out where along that continuum your loved one falls, or can be confusing and can be difficult, but it's probably one of the most important steps before we start talking about how to pay for long-term care. In fact, just within this last couple of weeks, we're working with one of our clients right now, and we're trying to identify what is the appropriate level of care for mom. One of the children thinks that mom needs to be in the nursing home. One of the other children thinks that mom should be back home, and mom wants to be back home. But she's had some falls, but she thinks that she can kind of bounce back and make it back. And so we're trying to figure out, are we going to look at a Medicaid and a way to pay for long-term care costs in a nursing home, or is mom going to go back home and try to stay at home safely and maybe bring in home care? And there's no bright line rules. And so in this situation, one of the things we're doing is bringing in a geriatric social worker, basically a social worker whose expertise is in doing evaluations and then making recommendations based on the level of need. Because my job, I'm not that type of nurse. I'm not a professional like that. My job is to make sure that the money lasts as long as the individual does and bring in things like veterans benefits, that type of thing. In our role, my capacity, I'm not it's not my position to serve that doctor role of prescribing what level of care someone needs. So it can be tough for families to identify just where along that continuum or when to take that next step to go from home care to assisted living or to go from assisted living to nursing home. But a lot of times when there's a lot of falls involved, that can be leading towards a crisis situation of needing nursing home care. So I need to identify kind of what level of care do we need. And so what I just described is kind of different pieces of this puzzle, different steps. And this is where a continued care retirement community comes in, because it can take away a lot of that decision-making, a lot of the gaps of trying to figure out which level of care do I need, because you can receive all of those levels of care just in one location. And so there's a variety of these continued care retirement communities available. And Fox Run is probably the most well-known example of this, very high-end. It's a very nice location. And I'm happy to be a part of their gala raising money for the Care Fund every year. And there's other continued care retirement communities as well. Presbyterian Villages of Michigan has, I think, now 2 continued care retirement communities, one in the Livonia-Redford area, and then also another one, I want to say, in the Macomb area. And then Canterbury on the Lakes is another continued care retirement community. They're in the Waterford area. So there's a few of these continued care retirement communities available. And like I said, the nice thing about these is that you can receive typically all the levels of care all on one location. Now, it might be kind of different parts or in different places on the property, but it's all at one location. So that's the nice part, because the transitions of leaving your home to move into an independent or assisted living, that can be a tough transition, or transitioning from independent living to another location for assisted living. The continued care retirement communities kind of takes away a lot of those problems. So typically with these continued care retirement communities, what you have to do is you have to buy in. So you have to give them X amount of dollars. And a lot of times it's when you sell your house, the proceeds of the sale might go to pay for that deposit. And then on top of that deposit, you might have monthly rents or bills based on the services that you receive there as well. So it's kind of like going all in. You're pushing all your chips into this continued care retirement community. And then they're basically saying that, hey, we're never going to kick you out. So whether you're living independently and you just kind of treat it as almost an apartment, or if you were to need care inside of that independent living on the continued care retirement community, or you might transition to one of their more assisted communities, all on the same property. And then they also have typically nursing home care there as well. So they're taking care of the whole elder care journey for you. So that's the pro, or that's the positive. That's the nice thing about them, is that you have this kind of guarantee that no matter what level of care you're going to need, you're going to stay in the same property. Now, one of the downsides with continued care retirement communities, and it's not necessarily a negative, it's just something you need to keep in mind, is that when you do go move into these places, it's very difficult to move out. So if a property were to take a downturn, and some of them aren't as nice as they used to be because of changes in staff or lack of funding. Understand you're basically all in, because to try to get out of there, a lot of times you have to sell, or they would have to sell your space. So I had some clients at one of these continued care retirement communities, not Fox Run, where the care went down and they wanted to transition or move to a different assisted living to get better care. And unfortunately, they were going to have to wait until their apartment space was sold, and it had taken them over a year already before that apartment was sold. So they were kind of stuck there. So that's the thing to keep in mind, is that when you go all in with one of these continued care retirement communities, you're kind of stuck there, whether you like it or not. Now, again, it's not necessarily a negative. It's just something to keep in mind, to go into these continued care retirement communities with open eyes so that you understand what you're getting into. And it's all about education, and that's really what we focus on here at the Chris Berry Show. And what we focus on at our firm is providing education, making sure that you're walking with your eyes open into the second half of life. And part of that is understanding that we are going to need long-term care. 3 out of 4 of us will need some form of long-term care during our lifetime. So it's important to understand the different types of care out there, whether it's home care, assisted living, nursing home care, or looking at a continued care retirement community. And then understanding, how do we pay for that care? And we'll get into that in the next segment as we get into the changes in the VA benefit, and now we have a 3-year look-back period, as well as the other ways that we can pay for long-term care. And that'll be on our next segment. In our third segment today, we're going to get into the questions and answer portion. So if you do have questions that you want answered from a certified elder law attorney and a financial planner, please give us a call anytime at 810-355-2584. Or you can email us anytime at askchris@thechrisberryshow.com. Or you can go to our website, thechrisberryshow.com, where you can contact us, ask any questions, as well as listening to past shows. So join us in our next segment as we keep talking long-term care and we talk about changes with regards to the VA benefit.
If you or a loved one is facing long-term care costs, make sure you talk with certified elder law attorney Chris Berry from the Elder Care Firm. He can help you, like he did Keith Gerard's family. Here's Keith.
Basically, it's my in-laws. They're both 90 and they can't live on their own or anything, and they don't have enough money to go in assisted living. We went to Chris Berry to get the VA benefits, and he said, well, we can get almost $2,000 a month, which they can put towards assisted living. It was a big relief. Most lawyers are pretty sharp, but Chris, he knows exactly his business. And it's a shame that these vets have to go through all these processes. But I guess we need people like Chris to help us out. He made it so easy for us.
Hello, I'm attorney Chris Berry. The Elder Care Firm is here to help you and your family find solutions. Call us today.
Get the governmental benefits you deserve. The Elder Care Firm is ready to help you. Visit theeldercarefirm.com today or call 810-214-3800.
Welcome back to the Chris Berry Show, where we talk wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. So last segment, we started talking about continued care retirement communities. I am a big fan of those, but just walk in with your eyes open. And then we talked about the long-term care journey or the elder care journey of needing home care, assisted living, nursing home care. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about kind of how to pay for that, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about veterans benefits. And the reason for that is we just had a huge change in law with regards to how we can help veterans and surviving spouses of veterans bring in extra $1,000 to $2,000 a month to help pay for the devastating cost of long-term care. But before we get into the VA benefit, I think it's important to understand just all of the different ways to pay for long-term care. And really, we only have 6 ways to pay for long-term care. And we have 2 approaches. One approach is we can plan ahead. So pre-plan. So get our ducks in a row before we have some type of long-term care event. And this would be setting up things like asset protection trusts, like a Veterans Asset Protection Trust or a Castle Trust, which can help protect against long-term care costs. Or maybe we look at asset-based long-term care strategies, where if you have $300,000 of IRA money, we could chip off $100,000 of that, still remains yours pre-tax, but now that might get you a $4,000 a month long-term care benefit for the rest of your life. So that's the first approach, is to plan ahead. And that's really the approach that we want the listeners of the Chris Berry Show to take, because you have more options available. And that's why we try so hard to get the word out there, provide education, because the earlier you start thinking about these things, planning for the second half of life, planning for long-term care costs, the more options you're going to have on the table. The second approach is the crisis plan. So having that long-term care crisis, what can we do at the last minute to try to bring in additional resources or to protect our resources? And this isn't to make sure the kids get some big inheritance or anything. It's just to make sure that you have the best quality of life possible. So understand that there are things we can do at the last minute, but it's not as effective. It's messy. We can't protect as much, and we can't bring in as much. And that's really one of the changes we're going to see today as we talk about this change in the VA benefit. Is we used to be able to do crisis VA planning, where if you had a veteran or surviving spouse who needed long-term care, whether home care or assisted living, we could immediately get them qualified for the VA benefit. But now, unfortunately, that type of planning has gone by the wayside, and we have to treat most situations where we do have a veteran or surviving spouse. We really are forced to look more to pre-planning, which means we need to think about these things earlier because of the 3-year look-back period for the VA benefit. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But let's first understand that we have two approaches on how we plan for long-term care costs. We can either plan ahead or we can operate from a crisis mode. And then B, once we've decided which route we're going to go, either way, we only have 6 ways to pay for long-term care. So let's look at those 6 ways, and we'll see how the VA benefit fits into that. And first, we can private pay, meaning we just pay out of our own funds, and we just spend down our money until we run out of money. So we spend our IRAs down, our spouse spends down their money, we spend down our checking, savings, mutual funds, and we just spend it on long-term care. Second option is we can have the kids pay. Now, a lot of times the kids don't pay financially, but they pay in terms of their time. Okay, whether they're taking time to kind of clean up or visit the elder law attorney, or they're putting their life on hold to become a full-time caregiver. Either way, a lot of times the kids do pay. The third way would be through long-term care insurance. And there used to be, or there still is, what's called traditional pure long-term care insurance. I'm not a huge fan of that for a couple of reasons. First of all, you could be paying on it for a number of years, and then all of a sudden the premiums increase on you. A lot of times when we're doing one of our weekly clarity building workshops that we do throughout Metro Detroit, I ask if anyone has a long-term care insurance policy that had a premium increase, and you should see the number of hands that shoot up. So that's a big issue, is these premium increases. And if you do want to attend one of our workshops, we do them about once a week. Give us a call anytime at 810-355-2584. It's a free workshop, but you do have to register, where we go over planning for the second half of life. And you can get information on our website at thechrisberryshow.com. We just had a great workshop last week at our Livonia office. So we're talking about the long-term care, and so we have this pure traditional long-term care insurance, where the first problem is you can have premium increases, where you pay on it for 20 years and then all of a sudden the premiums go up on you. And then the second big issue with the long-term care is that if you pass away peacefully in your sleep without using it, then that all that you paid into it is lost. So that's where asset-based long-term care came in as an answer to these issues, where if you do have premiums, they're guaranteed. And then if you were to pass away peacefully in your sleep, so let's say you put $100,000 into one, it might be a $200,000 tax-free death benefit to your beneficiaries. So it's just a way that we can answer that long-term care question. So that's the third way we can pay for long-term care, is with preferably asset-based long-term care insurance. Now, the fourth way is through Medicare. Now, Medicare doesn't really pay for long-term care. Medicare only pays for short-term rehab. So if you fall, break your hip, you go into the hospital, Medicare will pick up 1 to 20 days with zero out of pocket. After 20 days, then you'll have a copay of $169 per day, unless you have supplemental insurance to pick it up. And then after 100 days, Medicare runs out. So Medicare doesn't really pay for long-term care. So that brings us to the fifth way to pay for long-term care, which is veterans benefits. And this is where we saw a huge change. So let me just kind of describe VA benefits, and then we'll talk about the change in law. So to qualify for the VA benefit, which could bring in an extra $1,000 to $2,000 a month tax-free, there's 5 requirements. So first, the veteran has to have served 90 days active duty. Second, the veteran needs to have served one of those days during a period of conflict, such as World War II, Korea, Vietnam. Third, the veteran cannot be dishonorably discharged. So we get all this information, the 90 days active duty, 1 day during a period of conflict, cannot be dishonorably discharged, from the veteran's discharge papers, or DD-214 or separation papers. It'll have all that information. Then if we're getting a surviving spouse qualified, then we have to also have a marriage certificate and a death certificate for that veteran. So that part's pretty easy. That part's straightforward. Then the fourth requirement for the VA benefit is that we need to have more long-term care costs going out than we have any Social Security or pension coming in. So if we have a veteran who has $1,500 a month of Social Security plus $400 a month of pension from working at Ford, then that's $1,900. And so the veteran would have to be paying out $2,000 a month of long-term care costs to qualify for the maximum VA benefit, which for a single veteran would be just about $1,800 a month. Now, the fifth requirement, and this is where there's been a change. The fifth requirement was an asset test, where we looked at the amount of countable assets a veteran has, and if there are more than $30,000 to $60,000, chances are that veteran would not qualify. Now, the great thing about the VA program is that there was no look-back period, meaning a veteran could be over in assets. We could put together a Veterans Asset Protection Trust, move the assets into the trust, and then the next month get the veteran qualified for that VA benefit of extra $1,000 to $2,000 a month. Now, this is where the change has happened. Now there's a 3-year look-back period for that VA benefit. Well, not now, but the law has passed, and it's going to be implemented October 18th. So basically, we saw the final rule come a couple days ago, last week, and it's going to be a month before that rule is enacted. Now let's talk about the purpose of this. The purpose of this Veterans Asset Protection Trust wasn't to ensure the kids get some big inheritance or anything, or protect money, or to take money away from the veteran. What we're trying to do is make sure that the veteran's money lasted at least as long as the veteran did. Because the way that our system is set up, the more resources you have, the more resources you can protect, and the more resources you can bring in, the better your quality of life. So we had a lot of veterans and surviving spouses who sacrificed for this country and then accumulated some wealth. And all they wanted to do was make sure that their wealth lasted as long as they did. And so with this VA trust, we were able to bring in additional care for veterans and surviving spouses of veterans. I had many families come to me to say that if it weren't for this trust, that family wouldn't be able to get the care that they needed. Because by us setting up this type of trust, families were able to pay for the care they needed. We were able to, on top of their Social Security or any pensions, bring in extra $1,000 to $2,000 a month to help keep a veteran at home, to pay for home care. Or if they were in assisted living, to pay for them to be in an assisted living versus destitute and in some rundown nursing home. So seeing this change, it was pretty sad to see. And we knew that this 3-year look-back period would be coming along because the VA and Congress and government had proposed the rule back in 2015. And so what happens is they propose the rule change, and then they allowed a period of comment where anyone could comment on this proposed change. And over 900 people, including myself, commented on the change, on the law. And I didn't count, but I'm guessing close to, if not all of those comments were saying that this is a bad idea, only penalizing veterans. So I'm surprised that this rule change or law came through. But there was a period of comment for a year, and then they closed down that period of comment in 2016. And then basically every year since then, so 2016, 2017, and then even this year, we saw some internal rumblings that the law would be, the law change or the rule change would be implemented. We saw some changes in some VA forms every year to say it would be implemented in December. And even this year, we saw that the change potentially could be implemented, so we were planning for that. And looking at the internal forms the VA uses, it looked like it was going to be a December implementation, just based on the numbering. But then September 17th, a day before the law, the final rule was propagated, we saw what the final rule was going to be, and we saw that it was going to be an October 18th deadline, basically 1 month. So from when the rule was implemented, or when the final rule was passed, September 18th, they gave us 1 month to get any applications in. And so in our office, we had probably 7 applications already in process, where we had to get them in before the end of, basically now we have a month. Plus, we let all of our clients and potential clients know about the rule change. And just out of the woodwork, we've had a lot more cases coming in to try to get in before this October 18th deadline. So this, again, applies to the aid and attendance benefit or the non-service connected pension benefit, where now they change kind of how the net worth analysis works, and they're implementing a 3-year look-back period, 36 months. And it's pretty draconian the way the penalty would work if you were to submit an application with gifts where you moved money around within the 3 years, because the penalty could be as much as a 10-year penalty, meaning that you might not get your VA benefits for up to 10 years if you violate this rule or you operate within this rule incorrectly. So we're rushing to get in the claims of our current clients, as well as we just had a couple more people call in to try to get this application submitted, even though we met with them over a year ago or sometimes longer. But they see the writing on the wall for this pre-planning for the VA benefit. And again, I think it's sad because really Congress, by doing this, all they're doing is they're penalizing veterans and surviving spouses who need long-term care. So that veteran who served that now has Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or dementia, it wasn't enough that they served their country, but now they're going to penalize them and take away or make it even more difficult to qualify for a much-needed benefit. So I'm disappointed in the direction that Congress took with this, but and we did everything we could. We tried to fight this as long as possible, but unfortunately, that 3-year look-back period is moving forward, and October 18th appears to be the deadline. So we're just going to have to figure out where to go from there. So that's the big change with the VA benefit. And again, it was a way that we could pay for home care and assisted living and bring in additional care for veterans and surviving spouses who needed care. But now it's going to be similar to Medicaid with a lot of respects. So Medicaid is the 6th way to pay for long-term care. Medicaid only pays nursing home care, and Medicaid looks back 5 years to see if you moved any money around or made any gifts. And so now VA planning is going to look very similar to Medicaid planning, where with Medicaid planning, we set up asset protection trusts and try to make it 5 years. Well, now we're going to have to do the same with the VA benefit. There's going to be less of being able to take that second approach of operating in crisis mode. So again, it's just putting more reliance on pre-planning, planning ahead, getting your ducks in a row ahead of time versus waiting to the last minute and operating from that crisis mode. So big changes from the VA. Might have some questions from our listeners. Feel free to ask those questions. We'll cover them next week, and we'll get into questions and answers in our next segment. Thank you.
If you or a loved one is facing long-term care costs, make sure you talk with certified elder law attorney Chris Berry from the Elder Care Firm, like Jennifer did from Howell.
This past summer, my mom had to transition into a nursing home. So we contacted Chris to help get things in order. You know, I wanted the best. I wanted somebody who knew what they were doing. Chris was able to help save a lot of that money that my mom and dad both worked so hard for. I thought that everything would have to go to the nursing home, but it didn't. He was able to save us half of everything that would have gone if we hadn't contacted the Elder Care Firm. And we're all happy about that. Don't go to the nursing home without contacting Chris first.
Hello, I'm attorney Chris Berry. The Elder Care Firm is here to help you and your family find solutions. Call us today.
Protect your assets from probate, long-term care costs, the IRS, and get the governmental benefits you deserve. Visit theeldercarefirm.com today or call 810-214-3800. 810-214-3800.
Welcome back to the Chris Berry Show, where we talk wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. So now we're going to get into the question and answer portion of our show. And we do this every week. And if you do have questions, you can ask us questions anytime by calling at 810-355-2584. Or you can email us anytime at askchris@thechrisberryshow.com. And if you want to attend one of our free workshops where you can ask your questions in real time to a real elder law attorney and financial planner, then visit our website at thechrisberryshow.com. And we do these workshops about once a week at one of our different locations, whether it's Livonia, Brighton, Bloomfield Hills, or Novi. And a lot of people find that once they've attended one of these workshops, they get a lot of their questions answered. And it's a great way to learn more about things like VA benefits, like we talked about on this show, or long-term care costs, or the strategies to protect against long-term care costs, or IRA distribution strategies. And we're going to talk IRA basics on the next show next week, so we'll get into that. But let's get into our questions, and these have been submitted from our listeners. So the first question is from Shauna, and Shauna asks, what makes up my estate? Who needs estate planning? What makes a well-designed estate plan? If I have a living trust, do I need a will? So a lot of questions there. That could be a whole show in itself, I bet. But when we're talking about estate, just think of all the stuff you own. Kind of think of like your net worth. So your home, your automobile, your IRAs, your 401ks, your checking, your savings, your life insurance, your annuities. All of these things make up an estate. And think of it kind of like building a car. So when we talk about estate planning, if you're talking about kind of the legal planning that goes along with that, think of that as building the chassis or the body. So that's kind of the rules. That's the trust, is the chassis or the body. And then think of the financial plan, and the tax plan is the engine. And we need to make sure that when we drop that engine into that body, that everything fits together. So when we talk about what makes up an estate, think of all the stuff you own, all the things you have title to. So your home and a cottage up north, your automobile, your life insurance, your IRAs, your 401ks, checking, savings, just all your stuff. That's what makes up an estate. So who needs planning? Who needs estate planning? Was the second part of the question. Really, I think everyone does. And what we find is that it's different types of planning at different points in your life. For example, if you're young and just starting off and you graduated and now you're working, you got to figure out, well, do I want to contribute to a Roth IRA or a 401k? Who are going to be the beneficiaries of those things? And then you might get married, and now you need to think about, well, I want to take care of my spouse, and we have a home, and now maybe we have a child, and think about guardianship. If, God forbid, I get hit by a bus, who's going to be that substitute parent? The person named as guardian in the will, right? And then if you have minor children, young children, you probably don't want money going out right to them if you were to pass away. So you don't want your life insurance going out to them. So maybe you have a basic revocable trust that says it's held in trust. And then as you get older and your kids get older, and now maybe they get married and you have grandkids, and maybe now you want to get into asset protection trust to protect your children from a divorce or a lawsuit, a creditor action, or bankruptcy. Or maybe you're getting near retirement age and you're concerned about long-term care costs, or you had to take care of your mom or dad and you saw the long-term care costs that they had to pay. And now you want to get your ducks in a row and do some planning and maybe set up a castle trust, an asset protection trust, and look at asset-based long-term care and make sure that when you get to 70 and a half, you don't have a tax time bomb sitting there waiting for you. So long story short, once you start making money, you need to start thinking about planning. And the earlier you start thinking about planning, the more options you're going to have on the table. So I really think everyone needs a plan. It's just that where you're at in life is going to dictate what type of plan do you need. So next question is, and this is all from Shauna, and I appreciate this, what makes a well-designed estate plan? Well, Shauna, it's going to be different for everyone. A well-designed estate plan is a plan that meets your goals. And so I think that would be my answer to that, is a plan that meets your goals. And everyone's goals are going to be different, just like I talked about. When you first get married and you have a young baby, your goals of your estate and financial plan is going to look very different than someone who's approaching retirement and maybe a caregiver for their mom or dad. It's going to be different based on where you're at in life. So I think a well-designed estate plan or financial plan is a plan that meets your goals. And unfortunately, I see a lot of bad planning out there. We've reviewed a lot of financial plans, a lot of estate plans, and a lot of times what I'm saying is a plan that meets the financial planner's goals or the estate planner's goals, or it's a boilerplate and it doesn't meet the client's goals. And so that's why we walk our clients through a process to figure out exactly what their goals are. What are the things that they're concerned about? What are the things keeping them up at night? And so going through, we call it our peace of mind advantage process of setting up an estate plan. One of the tools we use is what's called an estate planning audit, where we figure out where you're at and then we figure out where you want to go, and we give you some options on how to close that gap. But we have about 10 to 15 different things that we go through to figure out if you want to include it as part of your planning. Do you want to protect against long-term care costs? Yes or no? Do you want to avoid probate? Do you have a child who might have special needs? These are all questions that should be asked from your advisors and your counselors and attorneys. And too often I see it as just boilerplate type planning where, okay, let me fill in the blank. Here's your trust. Let me fill in the blank. Here's your annuity. And I just don't think that's right. So I think a well-designed plan is one that meets your goals. And too often, I don't think people's goals are taken into account when it comes to developing a plan. And then Shauna's last question here, and again, I appreciate this, Shauna. If I have a living trust, do I need a will? So the question is, if I have a trust, do I also need a will? The answer is yes. You would always do what's called a pour-over will. So even if you have a trust, you want to name a will. And what a pour-over will says is that if any assets do end up in probate, they get knocked into the trust. Also, the other reason you want to have a will is that's where you appoint a personal representative who would be in charge of wrapping up your final affairs, paying any final expenses, paying for funerals, that type of thing. That's all handled through the personal representative, which is handled inside of the will. So hopefully that was helpful. And actually, Shauna, that brings up an interesting kind of client story from this week is you never know what different financial institutions will say, or this is a new one for us, is a funeral home. Funeral home was pushing back against one of our clients. They lost their mother, or they lost a loved one. It wasn't a mother. They lost a loved one, but the funeral home was saying that they had to sign a special funeral planner designation form to be able to handle their deceased loved one's affairs. Well, unfortunately, that's not what the law says. The law says that if you're named as a personal representative, then you fall in line with having the authority to make funeral or final expense decisions. So, again, that's something that's in the will. You're appointed personal representative, which then puts you in line to be able to make decisions with regards to funeral planning as well. So, good question, Shauna. I appreciate that. Hopefully that was helpful. Next question, this is from Nancy. So we did an estate plan in Florida and now moved back to Michigan. Do we need to update your estate plan? Nancy, the answer to that is yes. So some pieces of an estate plan are very state specific. So do you have to update the trust? Probably not, but it would be good to take another look at it. but for sure you need to update what we call disability documents. So these are the documents appointing someone to make disability decisions if you're unable to. So this would be the financial and the medical power of attorney. A lot of times those rely on state-specific language. And then also I'd say that the will should be updated as well, because a lot of times the will revolves around or depends on state-specific language. The trust, that's a little bit more mobile. So sometimes you should update the trust, but really it would be more if there was a change in circumstances, or if you had asked, well, one thing you would want to do for sure is make sure that your trust is funded properly. So if you sold a Florida residence and now you have a Michigan residence, you'd want to make sure that the Michigan residence is pointing to the trust. So Nancy, I'd for sure sit down and have your plan reviewed. Whether everything has to be updated, I'd say no, but I would say that the will and the financial and medical power of attorney should probably be updated. The trust, it really depends on whether you want to make changes to the trust or not. So hopefully that was helpful. Clarence writes in, how should I invest $20,000 from a settlement from a lawsuit? Well, the answer to this is it depends, because, Clarence, it depends on what your goals are. Just like I talked about with Shauna's question of what defines a good plan. A good plan is defined by a plan that meets your goals. So, Clarence, just because you have $20,000 sitting around, I don't know what your goals are. I don't know where you are at in life. I don't know if you have debt that should be paid off. I don't know if what your volatility tolerance is, how much risk you're willing to take on. Without knowing these things, I wouldn't really be able to provide you guidance on that. One thing I can tell you, though, if you do want to kind of take the next step, one of the things we do is we help clients figure out what their risk tolerance is. So if you did have $20,000 and you want to know kind of what type of investment you should invest it on, we have some software that can help you do that. So if you go to thechrisberryshow.com, in the show notes, we'll provide a link to our volatility tolerance software, where we can figure out kind of what your risk number is. So how much risk are you willing to take on with that $20,000? And that will be in the show notes. But for our listeners, you can go to riskscorenow.com, and you can figure out what your volatility tolerance would be. So that might be helpful for you, Clarence. Figure out, okay, if I have $20,000, how much risk am I willing to take on? And if you go to www.riskscorenow.com, that could be helpful for you. Next one. So this is from Shelley. So Shelley asks, I'm thinking about putting together my estate plan and want to provide for my pets. How do I do that? I'm single and I have no children. So, Shelley, in your situation, what we would do is we would do an estate plan that involves a pet trust. So you would most likely have a revocable trust, and as part of that revocable trust, you'd appoint someone to serve as trustee. So they'd be in charge of the money. They decide how it's used, but they'd have to follow the terms of the trust. So in the terms of the trust, what you could say is that I want to set up a pet trust or multiple trusts for your pets, just like we would for children, so that your trustee would manage that money for the benefit of the pets. And we've done this before. A lot of times people do it with like things like horses that have long lifespans, but we've done it for dogs and cats and all kinds of things. Turtle, we did it for a turtle once. And there's a famous case, Leona Helmsley, I want to say it's Leona Helmsley. And she had a dog named Trouble. And I want to say that she set up a pet trust that was like $2 million. It might have been, I think $2 million. So she set up a trust where this dog, Trouble, was going to have $2 million that a trustee would manage for the dog's benefit. So you certainly can do a pet trust. We've done it for a lot of our clients. In fact, I had a client, and again, I can't name names or anything here, so still protecting attorney-client privilege. But I had a client that had a couple children who, and she said it herself, they're basically derelicts. They were drug users, in and out of jail. They weren't working. They owed back child support. And she had quite a bit of money and some life insurance. And so she set up pet trusts for her 4 cats. She wanted to pay for pet health insurance because she knew in her extended family there's like 13 different cats. And so she wanted to pay for the health insurance for all these cats. And then it was kind of interesting. So she set up pet trust, but then the kind of interesting part was she wanted to give her kids just kind of one more crack at it to get their life on track after she passed away. So what she said is that each of the kids within a year had to pay back their back child support, had to have a driver's license, had to have gainful employment according to the trustee. There might have been some other, they had to donate 30 hours a time, it might have been 30 hours a time to the Humane Society. And if they did all of this within the year, then the trustee would release the funds to them, which was quite a large sum of money that each of the kids would receive. And then if not, then that share would go to the Humane Society. So she was a big pet lover, and it was just kind of interesting how she set up her trust. So, yeah, Shelley, to get back to you, back to your answer, yeah, we can set up an estate plan, a trust, where someone that you appoint, maybe it's a friend or family member, would serve as trustee, oversee that money, and then you would appoint separate out trusts for the animals. So if you had 3 animals, you could do 3 separate trusts, or you could do it all in one. But the trustee could be in charge of managing the money, and you can even appoint someone else to manage the pet, almost be a guardian for the pet, similar to how we do it for children. You might have one person who's like a really good parent, pet parent, if you will, but then someone good with money. So you could have a separate trustee as well as a person taking care of the animal. But it's always a good thing to think about. Sometimes we forget about our furry friends or scaly friends, depending on what type of animal it is. But yeah, so Shelley, of course, we can do a pet trust. And if you want more information on that, you could attend one of our weekly workshops and ask us that question in person and get started in the process. But that's it for the questions and answers this week. I hope you enjoyed the show. I want to thank everyone that supported us, supported the Walk to End Alzheimer's. It meant a lot seeing those donations come through. Like I said, next week we should have our final numbers. It looks like we're going to have over at least $10,000 raised as a team. As a walk, we're going to have over $130,000, it looks like. So I'm really excited about that. And I want to thank everyone for taking time to help donate and listen to me talk about Alzheimer's the last couple months, or last couple shows. It's something that's near and dear to my heart, and I appreciate all the support that we've had. And join us next week. We're going to get into some IRA conversations, things to think about with regards to your IRAs, which a lot of times are people's largest asset. So join us next Sunday on The Chris Berry Show. Thank you. Make it a great week.
Learn more about Chris Berry and the Elder Care Firm by visiting online at MichiganEstatePlanning.com. That's MichiganEstatePlanning.com. You can also call Chris Berry at 888-390-4360. 888-390-4360. This program content reflects the opinions of Chris Berry and his guests, not the Elder Care Firm, Prosperity Capital Advisors, or the C.J. Berry Group, and is subject to change at any time without notice. Content provided herein is for informational purposes only and should not be used or construed as investment or legal advice or a recommendation regarding the purchase or sale of any security or to follow any legal or tax strategy. There's no guarantee that the strategist's statements, opinions, or forecast provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses, which would reduce returns. All investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There's no guarantee that any investment plan or strategy will be successful. We recommend that you consult with a professional dedicated to your needs. This program is furnished by the Elder Care Firm.